Welcome to The Explainer. You know, in a world that's changing faster than ever, we talk a lot about learning new things. But what if our greatest asset isn't what we learn, but what we're willing to unlearn? Today, we're going to break down this superpower. Okay, let's just dive right in. To really get why unlearning is so important, we have to start by looking at how holding on to old knowledge, especially the stuff that made us successful, can actually become a huge liability. I mean, just think about Kodak. They literally invented the digital camera, but they were so locked into the profits from their film business, they couldn't unlearn their dependency on it. Their greatest success became the very anchor that sank the ship. It's a classic cautionary tale. And look, we've all just lived through a massive global experiment in unlearning. Before 2020, the idea of widespread remote work was, well, a tough sell for many. The pandemic forced us to unlearn decades of habits around the 9-to-5 office culture, almost overnight. That long-held belief that productivity would just plummet, it was totally shattered, forcing us to rethink everything. So here's the bottom line. The rules of the game have completely changed. In the past, success was all about stability, about perfecting what you already knew. But today, success demands constant adaptation, and that means you have to be willing to take apart the very models that got you here in the first place. Okay, so we know it's important. But what is unlearning really? It's a term that gets thrown around a lot, but to actually use it, we've got to be crystal clear on what it means and what it doesn't. And this right here is the absolute key distinction. Forgetting is passive. It just kind of happens to you, right? You forget where you put your keys. But unlearning, that's active. It's an intentional, conscious choice to set aside an old mental model to make way for a new one. I love this definition because it highlights this idea of creating space. Unlearning isn't like hitting delete on a file in your brain. It's more like spring cleaning for your mind. You're intentionally clearing out the old, outdated stuff to make room for new, more relevant information to come in. And this model from Barry O'Reilly just lays it out perfectly. Look, unlearning isn't the final goal. It's the essential first step. You have to unlearn the things holding you back before you can effectively relearn and experiment with new ideas. And that is where you get your breakthrough. So this all sounds great, but let's be real. If unlearning is so important, why is it one of the hardest things for us to do? Well, the answer is basically wired right into our brains. And before we get into the science, just take a second and think about this for yourself. That one habit, that old belief, that outdated skill, what makes it so hard to just let it go, even when you know it's holding you back? It turns out our brains have these built-in defense mechanisms, these cognitive biases that fight to protect our existing beliefs. You've got the sunk cost fallacy whispering, but we've already invested so much time and money. Or our own ego, which makes admitting we were wrong feel like a personal attack. These biases make us cling to what's familiar, even when it's not working anymore. And get this, it's not just a psychological thing, it's physical. Thanks to neuroplasticity, we know our most ingrained habits are strong, well-traveled neural pathways in our brain. Unlearning is the difficult work of weakening those old connections and building new ones. You are literally rewiring your brain. Okay, so if we're fighting against our own wiring, how do we even begin? The good news is there are practical tools we can use to make this process a little easier. Let's get into your toolkit. This framework is so simple, but it's incredibly powerful. First, you just state the facts. What happened? No judgment, just the data. Then you analyze it. So what? Why does this matter? What's the impact? And finally, you make a plan. Now what? What are the concrete steps I'm going to take? It forces you out of just thinking and into doing. Now, unlearning feels risky. It means admitting an old way doesn't work or that you might be wrong. And in any kind of team setting, you just can't do that kind of vulnerable work without a foundation of psychological safety. And this is exactly why it's so crucial. When you have a psychologically safe environment, it totally reframes mistakes. They stop being failures you have to hide and instead become valuable learning opportunities. It gives people permission to challenge the old way of doing things without fear. So let's zoom out for a second and look at the big picture here, because this is so much more than just a useful skill for your career. It's really about a fundamental shift in how we have to approach the future. Think about it. In a world that's always in flux, just learning new things is the bare minimum. The real advantage, the skill that enables all other skills, is unlearning. It's the engine that powers our ability to be resilient and adapt,
not just once, but over and over again.
And this, for me, is the most powerful idea of all. In a world where outdated beliefs and old systems can cause real harm or hold back progress, the ability to unlearn stops being just a good idea. It becomes a responsibility. So I'll leave you with this one question to think about. In your work, in your life, what is the one single belief that, if you could truly let it go, would unlock a completely different future for you? Thanks for watching The Explainer.